The call came at 11:47 at night. Adeline knew because she had been staring at the ceiling for hours, watching the shadows from the hallway lights stretch across the plaster. And she had just looked at the clock on the nightstand when her phone buzzed against the wood. She almost didn't answer. She almost let it go to voicemail, the way she had been letting so many things go lately. The laundry piled in the corner, the dishes from 2 days ago, the conversation with her mother she kept putting off because she didn't have the energy to explain what was wrong when she wasn't entirely sure herself. But the name on the screen stopped her. It was Lawrence, and something in her chest tightened before she even pressed the green button. "Hey," she said. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. There was a pause on the other end, a long one, the kind that has weight to it. "Adeline." His voice was flat. Not cold exactly, just flat, like he was reading from something. "I need you to come home. The house is a mess and I've got an early call tomorrow." She was quiet for a moment. "Lawrence," she said slowly, "I'm at the hospital." Another pause. "I know, you've been there 2 days. You need to come home and take care of things here." She looked at the IV line taped to the back of her hand. She looked at the monitor blinking green beside her bed. She looked at the thin cotton blanket pulled up to her waist and the cup of ice chips on the tray table that a nurse named Patricia, not Patricia from the list, a real woman older with reading glasses on a chain, had brought her an hour ago because her throat was dry and she couldn't stop shivering. She was 31 years old, and she was lying alone in a hospital bed with a fever of 103 and an infection that had spread to her kidney, and her husband of 4 years was calling to ask her to come home and clean the house. She didn't say anything for a long moment. And in that silence, something shifted, not loudly, not dramatically. There was no sudden clarity, no lightning bolt, no moment where the fog lifted and everything became obvious. It was quieter than that. It was the kind of shift that happens so deep inside a person that they don't even have words for it right away. They just feel it. Like a door closing, like something that had been slowly loosening finally letting go. "Okay," she said, and she hung up. Adeline Marsh grew up in Decatur, Georgia, in a house on a street where every yard had a chain-link fence, and every family knew each other's business whether they wanted to or not. Her mother, Ruth, worked the front desk at a dental office for 22 years. Her father, George, drove a delivery truck until his back gave out, and after that he drove a school bus. They were not wealthy. They were not struggling either, not in the way that kept the lights off or skipped meals, but there was always a careful accounting of things. What could be afforded, what had to wait, what would never happen. Adeline was the younger of 2 daughters. Her sister, Tamsin, was 4 years older and had always known exactly what she wanted. Tamsin became a physical therapist, married a man named Douglas who coached youth basketball, and moved 40 minutes north to Marietta, where she had a mortgage and a garden and a golden retriever named Biscuit. Adeline did not always know what she wanted. That was her problem, or at least, that was what she told herself. She was good at many things but passionate about none of them. And she spent most of her 20s feeling like she was watching her own life from a slight distance, waiting for something to click. She met Lawrence Holt at a work happy hour when she was 26. He was 32. He was tall and confident, and he laughed loudly at his own jokes, which at the time struck her as charming rather than what it actually was. He had a good job in commercial real estate, and he dressed well, and he seemed, in those first months, genuinely interested in her thoughts, her opinions, the small stories she told about her family and her childhood. She had never been with someone who listened like that, who leaned in when she talked, who texted just to say he had been thinking about something she said 3 days ago. So when he proposed 14 months after they met, she said yes. Her mother hugged her on the front porch and said, "Baby, you deserve someone who makes you feel safe." Adeline had smiled and said, "He does, Mom." She believed it when she said it. She was still trying to believe it on their 2nd anniversary. When Lawrence stood in the kitchen doorway at 6:30 in the morning and told her that if she wasn't going to contribute financially, the least she could do was have dinner on the table at a reasonable hour. She had left her job not because he asked her to exactly, but because the pressure had been building for months, in the way that pressure does when someone never directly says what they want, but makes it clear through silences and sighs. And the particular way they look at you when you mention overtime or a work dinner. She had been a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing firm, and she had been good at it. But Lawrence had a way of making her feel like her job was a hobby she was overly attached to. Like she was choosing something frivolous over something that mattered. "I just think," he had said one evening, sitting across from her at dinner with his fork moving slowly through his pasta, not quite looking at her, That if we're going to start a family, one of us needs to be present, and it makes more sense for it to be you, since my income is, he gestured vaguely, more stable. She had nodded. She had told herself it made sense. She quit her job 3 weeks later. That was the first door. There were others. The dinner parties where she was expected to cook for 8 people, and then laugh at the right moments and refill glasses, and never mention that she used to design campaign materials that won industry awards. The budget conversations where he reviewed her grocery receipts the way an auditor reviews expense reports. The friends who fell away gradually, not because he forbade her to see them, but because getting out of the house required a conversation she was too tired to have, and it was easier to cancel and reschedule and eventually stop being invited. She told herself she was building something, a home, a partnership, a life. She told herself a lot of things. The fever started on a Tuesday. She thought it was a cold at first. She drank water and took ibuprofen and told herself she would feel better by Thursday. By Thursday, she was shaking under 3 blankets in the middle of the afternoon and couldn't keep anything down. She called Lawrence at work. "I think I need to go to the doctor," she said. "Can it wait until tonight? I've got back-to-back showings until 6. It could not wait until tonight. She called a rideshare and took herself to the urgent care clinic 2 miles away, where a nurse took her temperature and her blood pressure and disappeared for 3 minutes, and came back with a doctor who said they needed to send her to the ER. She texted Lawrence from the waiting room. "Going to the ER. They're worried about my kidney." He texted back 40 minutes later. "Which hospital? Let me know when you're settled." He did not come. She was admitted that evening. A kidney infection that had moved into her bloodstream. The doctor, young, tired, kind in the efficient way that doctors get when they've been on their feet for 14 hours, said she would need IV antibiotics for at least 48 hours, and that she was lucky she came in when she did. "Is there someone we can call to be with you?" the admitting nurse asked. "My husband knows I'm here," Adeline said. The nurse nodded and didn't push it, but she came back an hour later to check on her, and then again after that, and Adeline understood this was not standard procedure. Lawrence visited once. He came on the second morning, stayed 40 minutes, ate a granola bar from the vending machine he didn't offer to share, and said 3 times that he had a lot going on at work. When he left, he kissed her forehead, the way you kiss someone out of obligation, the way you kiss a picture frame you're hanging crooked on a wall just to get it done. And that night, at 11:47, he called. She did not go home. She lay in that hospital bed after hanging up the phone, and she stared at the ceiling, and she thought about her mother's voice on the porch. "Baby, you deserve someone who makes you feel safe." And she thought about the moment she realized she no longer felt safe. Not unsafe in the physical sense, not in the way she had been afraid to define for years because defining it meant doing something about it. Just not safe. Like standing on ice that you know is too thin, but you keep walking because the shore seems so far away, and you've already come this far. She thought about the award she won at 24 for a campaign she designed for a children's literacy nonprofit. She thought about how she had stayed late 3 nights in a row to finish it, and how good it felt to hold the little glass trophy, and how Lawrence, when she told him about it later, they hadn't been dating long, had said, "That's cute, do you get a bonus?" She hadn't thought about that moment in years. Funny, the things that come back to you when you're lying alone in a hospital bed at midnight. She called Tamsin. It rang 4 times and she was about to hang up when her sister picked up. Groggy and confused. "Adeline, what's wrong? What time is it?" "Almost midnight. I'm sorry. I'm in the hospital." She heard Tamsin sit up fast. "What? What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm okay. I'm sick. I have a kidney infection. I've been here 2 days. She stopped. Her throat was tight. "Lawrence just called me to ask me to come home and clean the house." There was long silence. "Adeline, I know. He knows you're in the hospital." "Yes." Another silence. She could hear Tamsin breathing, could hear faintly Douglas asking something in the background and Tamsin saying, "Go back to sleep." "Okay," Tamsin said finally. "Okay, I'm coming. You don't have to. I'm coming in the morning. I'll be there by 8. You don't say anything, you don't go anywhere, you just rest. Do you hear me?" Adeline closed her eyes. "Yeah," she said. "I hear you." She did not sleep well that night, but for the first time in a very long time she did not feel alone. Tamsin arrived at 7:58 with a tote bag containing a real blanket, not a hospital blanket, a soft one from home, a thermos of good coffee, a breakfast sandwich from the place Adeline had loved since college, and 12 years of older sister energy that she directed immediately and efficiently at the situation. She sat down in the chair beside Adeline's bed, unwrapped the sandwich, handed it over, poured coffee into the thermos cap, and said, "Tell me everything, from the beginning." So Adeline did. She talked for almost 2 hours. She had not talked like that in years, not about any of this, not the way she was talking now, without softening the edges or second-guessing herself, or pausing to say to be fair to Lawrence before every other sentence. She said things she had not let herself say even in her own head. She said she was lonely. She said she felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, or maybe she had seen it and just chosen not to look. She said she had spent 4 years making herself smaller and smaller, and telling herself it was love when really it was just accommodation, and she wasn't even sure when one had become the other. Tamsin listened. She didn't interrupt. She didn't say I knew it or I told you, or any of the things that would have felt like a verdict. She just listened, and when Adeline finally ran out of words, she reached over and put her hand on top of Adeline's, IV line and all. "You're not stupid," Tamsin said. "You loved him, and then you kept loving him past the point where it was making sense because that's what you do. You're not stupid. You're just—" She searched for the word, stubborn about hope. Adeline laughed despite herself, and then she cried, both at the same time, which is a very particular kind of relief. She was discharged the following afternoon. Tamsin drove her back to the house in Midtown, where she had lived with Lawrence for 3 years. It was a nice house. Original hardwood floors, high ceilings, a kitchen she had spent months renovating in her head before they moved in. She had picked the paint colors. She had hung the curtains. She had kept every surface clean and organized, because it was the one thing she felt she had full control over, and she had poured everything she couldn't say out loud into the arrangement of throw pillows, and the particular way she folded the dish towels. Lawrence was not home. He had texted that morning, showings all day. Back around 7, no question about the hospital. No asking when she was being discharged. No offer to pick her up. She packed 2 bags. Tamsin helped her carry them to the car, and she did not cry, and she did not leave a note. There was nothing she needed to say that she hadn't already said in her own head 100 times, and that she wasn't going to say better on paper at 4 in the afternoon. When she was still exhausted and still on antibiotics, and still a little unsteady on her feet, she sat in the passenger seat of Tamsin's SUV and watched the house get smaller in the side mirror, and she felt something she couldn't entirely name. Not happiness, not relief exactly. Something more like the particular stillness of a storm that's been going for so long you've forgotten what silence sounds like, and then suddenly it stops. She stayed with Tamsin and Douglas for 6 weeks. Douglas, for his part, was uncomplicated and kind. He made extra food without being asked. He gave up the home office so she could work in there during the day. He didn't ask questions, and he didn't give opinions, and she understood why Tamsin had married him. She called a lawyer. A woman named— the name is not important, what matters is that she was thorough and calm, and wore reading glasses on the end of her nose, and spoke about Adeline's situation in clear, plain language that made Adeline feel less like a woman whose life was falling apart, and more like a person navigating a complicated but solvable problem. The marriage had been 4 years. There were no children. There was a jointly owned property, and a jointly held bank account she had contributed to, indirectly, through 4 years of labor that had kept Lawrence's life running smoothly enough that he could focus entirely on building his career. "You have more ground to stand on than you think," the lawyer said. Lawrence did not take it well. There were calls, there were texts. There were exactly 3 conversations, each one following the same arc. He was reasonable at first, then wounded, then angry, then reasoning again, cycling through the positions with the speed of someone who has always moved faster than the people around them. He said she was overreacting. He said she had twisted everything in her head. He said she was throwing away everything they had built. She let him talk. She did not argue. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she had learned, slowly at a cost, that some conversations are not about arriving at truth. They are about dominance. And she did not want to win. She wanted to be done. The divorce was finalized 11 months later. By that point, Adeline had a 1-bedroom apartment in East Atlanta with good light, and a view of the neighbor's magnolia tree through the kitchen window. She had reached out tentatively to a former colleague, a woman named Octavia who had her own small creative studio and needed someone part-time to help with client work. It was not glamorous. It was not the career trajectory she might have had at 27 if she had stayed. But she was good at it, and being good at something felt, in that first year, like enough. She went to therapy. She had a therapist who asked questions she had not thought to ask herself, and who never once said you should have left sooner, which was good because Adeline was already saying it to herself and did not need any help with that particular brand of self-criticism. She called her mother more. Ruth, who had retired from the dental office by then, and spent her mornings tending a very enthusiastic raised bed garden, always answered. They talked about small things: the garden, a neighbor's new baby, what Adeline had been cooking for dinner. But sometimes, in the middle of those conversations, Ruth would say something that landed like a stone in still water. "You know," Ruth said once on a Tuesday afternoon in late fall, "I always worried about you. Not because something was wrong with you, just because you felt things so deeply and you were so quiet about it. Kept it all in here." She pressed her hand to her chest, though Adeline could not see this through the phone. "I just want you to let yourself be loud sometimes, even just for yourself." Adeline thought about that for a long time. There was a community center 4 blocks from her apartment. She had walked past it dozens of times. It ran programs for girls between the ages of 10 and 17, after-school activities, tutoring, summer workshops. The woman who ran it was named Della, and Adeline knew she had to check the list, and Della was on the list. So she won't be Della. The woman who ran it was named Josephine, a small woman in her 60s with silver locks and an organizational binder that she carried everywhere and consulted the way other people consult holy texts. Adeline had walked past the sign for months before she walked through the door. She had gone in to ask about volunteering. She left with a Wednesday afternoon slot teaching a graphic design basics class to 12-year-olds who did not want to be there. She had not expected to love it. She loved it. There is something about sitting across from a 12-year-old who is skeptical of you and watching the moment they stop being skeptical. When something clicks, when they lean toward the screen instead of away from it, when they say, "Wait, show me that again," that cannot be replicated by any professional achievement. It is just its own thing, its own small, specific joy. She started going twice a week, then 3 times. Josephine gave her a key to the supply closet. 2 years after she walked out of the hospital, Adeline sat on the front steps of the community center on a warm Thursday evening in April, waiting for the last of her students to be picked up. The magnolias were out. The street was quiet. A girl named Brianna, 12 years old, half a foot of natural hair, the most natural design eye Adeline had seen in 20 years of working with visuals, sat beside her on the steps, showing her something on a phone. "See, I did the contrast different this time," Brianna said, tilting the screen toward her. "Like you said, made the background darker so the text pops." Adeline looked at it, really looked at it. "Brianna," she said. "What? This is really good." The girl rolled her eyes in the particular way of 12-year-olds receiving compliments they secretly want. "I know," she said. Adeline laughed. Behind them, through the open door of the community center, she could hear Josephine on the phone. Something about a grant, about funding for the fall semester, about whether the city would renew the lease. Things that needed to be worried about. Things that would get worked out. The sun was going down over the rooftops. The light was orange and long, the kind of light that makes everything look like a painting. And Adeline sat on the steps of a building that mattered and thought about a phone call 2 years ago and a hospital bed and the specific weight of a conversation she had needed to have with herself for a long time. She had not gotten everything she thought she was building. The house, the partnership, the version of life that had seemed, at 26, like the right one to be building toward. But she had gotten something else. She was not sure yet what to call it. Maybe that was okay. Maybe it didn't need a name. Brianna's mother pulled up in a green sedan, and the girl grabbed her bag and jogged down the steps, and at the bottom she turned back and said, "Same time next week?" "Same time next week," Adeline said. The car pulled away. The street was quiet again. Adeline stayed on the steps a little longer, until the light faded, and the magnolias went from gold to gray, and then she stood up, went back inside and turned off the lights.